Well over 20 million people have been checkmated by just these 6 opening traps, and the first one has over 430,000 victims. It starts with e4, e5, and after knight f3, knight f6, this of course being the Petrov defense. White will often take on e5, and then black will play knight c6, initiating the Stafford Gambit, a very aggressive way for black to play. White will capture on c6 and b up a pawn, but of course black is threatening that e4 pawn, so white will often play pawn to d3, creating a pawn chain and defending e4. Black will continue that development with bishop c5 and prepare to castle, an excellent move. And so often, and when I say so often, I mean hundreds of thousands of games have gone with the move bishop g5, a totally natural looking move, developing a piece and pinning the knight to the queen. But if you look at that eval bar, you see that black is winning now. Do you see why? Well, it's because black can play the brilliant knight takes e4, at once hitting the pawn on f2 with the knight and bishop, and hitting the bishop on g5 with the knight and queen. There's no real great way to defend it, so you might as well try to grab the queen and hope for the best. But here black has a beautiful mate in 2 with bishop takes f2 check, the king is forced up to e2, and then bishop g4 is mate. A beautiful mate in 8 Stafford Gambit style. So this is a great way to start off our list, but black has found an even more brutal way to sacrifice the e5 pawn when white chooses to play with d4. With over 800,000 people being checkmated by the England Gambit, and that goes with d4, e5. White will capture that e5 pawn, and after knight c6, knight f3, and queen e7, white will choose to keep that e5 pawn with bishop to f4. Black's idea is to go queen b4, check, attacking the king, the bishop, and the pawn on b2. White's only response is bishop to d2, and black here will take on b2. Now, white has decided, for some reason, over a million times, that bishop c3 is the best response. But sometimes the most common move is not the best move. And this move loses on the spot because of the very nice move, bishop b4, pinning the bishop to the king, saving the queen. Now, this may not seem like much, but here, white will play the move queen to d2, since the bishop on c3 is threatened twice, and you don't want to take on b4, because if you do, the knight will come into b4 and then into c2. So queen d2 will be played to defend that bishop, but here the bishop will take on c3, and of course, momentarily, black is threatening the queen on d2 and the rook on a1. So of course, white's going to take back with the queen, and everything seems hunky-dory until you realize that black just has checkmated 1 with queen c1. Wow. Now, if 8 moves is too long for you, and if you would like to bump up your victim total into the millions, then this next opening is for you. Now, admittedly, it requires total cooperation from your opponent, but somehow well over 1 million people have fallen for this, the shortest checkmate of them all, f3, e5, g4, and queen h4 mate. The fool's checkmate. This is the most common way the fool's checkmate can happen. There's 4 possible variants. When you add them all together, over 1 million people have lost this way. And it's chess.com alone. We're talking chess.com, over 1 million people have lost. But there's also Elite Chess, all the other chess websites, and all the in-person games that have ever been played. I don't know why they do it, but it's there. And so if you are ready to play with e5 and your queen, you might can get this checkmate too sometimes. Now, if you don't expect total cooperation from your opponent, and you expect the game to last a little bit longer, let's try to up the sophistication with the most brilliant way to sacrifice the e5 pawn. Let's go back to that e5 pawn with the Blackburn Schilling Gambit. After e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, we see bishop c4. Of course, this is the Italian game. And here black plays the inexplicable move, knight d4, a horrid move. This is a terrible move. You should never do this. First off, it looks like it's hanging the e5 pawn, and you're moving the knight a second time in a row for no good reason. Or is there a good reason? Well, apparently, millions and millions of people haven't said, wait a second, my opponent's playing such a bad move. Is this a trap? No, they just go right for the obviously hung pawn on e5, but this is where the trap begins. Here, black will play queen g5, targeting the g2 pawn and that knight on e5. And here, white will double down on the capture and take on f7, immediately losing the game. White has won 2 pawns and is forking the queen and rook, but that's where the fun ends. Here, black plays the move queen takes g2, hitting the rook on h1, and after rook f1, queen e4 is almost checkmate. And of course, you don't want to sacrifice your queen, so you bring back your bishop on e2, and suddenly, everything is totally safe. Your king is perfectly surrounded by pieces. But if you have an eagle eye, I am sure you see what has brought over 2.6 million people to their knees. We have knight f3 checkmate. Smothered checkmate. Beautiful. 2.6 million times this checkmate has been played on chess.com alone. This is a wonderful pattern, and you should definitely know it. But if you want to snag even more victims and maybe play slightly less risky, because remember, the Blackburn Shilling Gambit is a terrible gambit. Don't play it unless you're trying to get that checkmate. If you're trying to play a little bit more solidly, then this next opening is for you. After white goes e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, here black can play knight to f6. And here, you can play the move knight g5. And we're looking at this from white's perspective now. White's played all best moves so far. There's been nothing wrong. Here, black will play d5, and after e takes d5, knight takes d5. This is a very risky way to play, but everyone does it for some reason. Here, white plays the brilliant move, knight takes f7. I can't believe it, but millions of people have found this a brilliant sacrifice. They know their openings, and now you do too. Here, black can take on f7, and white will go queen to f3. And I can tell you, it looks mad. But the best and only move to survive for black is king e6, defending that knight on d5. You gotta risk it for the biscuit, they say. But when you don't, you, along with millions of other people, will go king e8 and lose that knight on d5. Now, black's already losing in this position, just simply down a pawn, and his king can't castle. But for whatever reason, black decides that now's the time to strike back. And about 2.8 million people have played the move knight d4, inviting their opponent to play queen f7 checkmate. 2.7 million times this has happened. I might be like, what about the other 0.1 million? Remember I said 2.8 million? I've played knight to d4. Yeah, like 100,000 people haven't found this checkmate. Don't be one of them. But anyway, this pales in comparison to the last checkmate, with all of its possible variants coming to a total of 15 million victims on chess.com alone, if not more. We have e4, e5, and then queen h5. It's the scholar's checkmate. Here, most people are smart enough to realize that the e5 pawn is under threat, so they play the move knight to c6. And of course, white will play bishop c4, trying to go for queen f7 mate. And for whatever reason, the most common response is knight f6, and white will go queen to f7 checkmate. Now, of course, there are plenty of lines that also go g6, followed by queen to f3, and now the queen is retreating, so it's time to get aggressive. Knight d4, let's go! To get checkmated again. When you add all these different ways to get the scholar's mate, over 15 million people on chess.com alone have been mated this way. And that is the 6 most common checkmate patterns in the history of chess. Make sure you know them. Make sure you're the one giving the checkmates, not receiving them. I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.